and Scarlett Mercer had already made up her mind. She didn't say anything yet, but the decision was there, settled and comfortable, the way certainty always feels when you haven't been tested. He didn't notice, or if he did, he didn't show it. He just sat in the lobby chair with his daughter on his knee, answering her questions about the building with the kind of patience that never runs out. 3 weeks later, his name would appear on the front page of the Wall Street Journal above a number that had 9 digits in it, and Scarlett would understand, too late, that the most expensive mistake she ever made cost her nothing but a few careless seconds. If you've ever written someone off before they had a chance to speak, keep listening. This story is for you. The morning Scarlett Mercer walked into Pinnacle Tower, Manhattan was doing what it did best in early October, a thin gray drizzle that turned the sidewalks dark and made everyone move faster than they meant to. She stepped off the elevator on the ground floor with her gray pencil skirt, nude heels, and leather portfolio tucked under one arm, and she scanned the lobby the way she always did, a habit built over 6 years in luxury real estate, where reading a room in the first 10 seconds was the difference between landing a deal and watching it walk out the door. The man sitting near the front desk registered in her mind as a category, not a person. Flannel shirt, navy and white, soft from too many washes. Khaki pants slightly creased at the knees. Brown leather shoes with the left heel worn down at an angle that suggested years of use and no immediate plans for replacement. A paper coffee cup sat on the side table next to him, long cold, and on his lap, a small girl, maybe 5, with dark curls and serious brown eyes, was holding a stuffed white rabbit and asking questions that did not stop. "Daddy, is this building taller than clouds?" The man thought about it. Not a brush-off, not a hurry-up answer. An actual pause, as if the question deserved one. "The 37th floor gets close," he said. "But clouds don't stay in one place. So it depends on the day." The little girl considered this. "Cotton wants to go up and see. Cotton will have to wait." Scarlett moved toward the security desk. She had a 9 o'clock with Marcus Webb, her department head, and after that, a full morning of pre-closing reviews on the Riverside Apex project, the one she'd spent the last 18 months building from a rough site plan into something that could anchor the West Side development corridor for the next decade. She had no reason to think about the man in the flannel shirt again. On the low table beside him, half tucked beneath his cold coffee cup, was a small notepad. 2 lines of handwriting, the kind of shorthand a person uses when they're writing only for themselves. She didn't read it as she walked past. She had no reason to. But the top line, if she had paused, would have read, 420 million Q3 close. The lobby attendant called his name. Sebastian Holt stood up. He was taller than the chair had suggested, broader through the shoulders. He moved with an economy of motion that wasn't hurried and wasn't slow, the walk of someone who has never needed to prove anything by his pace. He held his daughter's hand and said something quietly to her, and she nodded and held Cotton tighter. Scarlett was already at the security desk. She did not look back. The collision happened on the 12th floor, in the hallway outside the internal conference rooms, and it was Lily's fault in the most innocent way possible. The marble floors in the Pinnacle building were beautiful and completely merciless after rain. Lily's sneakers, white with pink Velcro, slightly damp from the morning commute, found a wet patch near the elevator bank and went out from under her in an instant. Cotton flew. Lily went down on both knees with the particular sharp crack that makes every parent's stomach drop, and she let out a sound halfway between a gasp and a wail. Sebastian was already moving before the sound finished. He crossed the 3 feet between them in one step, crouched, and got both hands around his daughter with a steadiness that came from practice, not panic, not performance, just a father who had done this before and knew exactly what to check first. He ran his thumb carefully along the back of her right knee, then the left, pressed gently, watched her face. "Does this hurt?" Lily sniffled. "A little. Scale of 1 to 10. 3. A pause. And a half. "Okay, 3.5 we can work with." Scarlett had been walking the same hallway with Marcus Webb, who had a tendency to narrate everything he observed out loud, which was useful in marketing and occasionally unfortunate everywhere else. He stopped when he saw the little girl on the floor, and then he looked at Sebastian crouched over her, and then he looked at Scarlett with the expression of a man who thinks he's noticed something funny. "Not bad, right?" Marcus said quietly. just to her. Man who knows how to handle a crisis. Scarlett, I'm just saying, she didn't plan what came out next. That was the honest truth of it, though it wouldn't make it better later. It came from somewhere automatic, the part of her that had been managing her image since she was 22, and walked into her first boardroom knowing she'd be underestimated, the part that had a reflex for distance. "Marcus," she said, just loud enough. "Come on, I don't date men like that." 3.5 people heard it. Marcus. A lobby attendant passing at the wrong moment. Lily, who had stopped sniffling and was now looking up with wide, uncertain eyes. And Sebastian. He didn't flinch. He didn't look up right away. He pulled a cloth handkerchief from his jacket pocket, real cloth, not a paper napkin, and pressed it carefully against the faint red mark on Lily's left knee. He worked slowly, the way you do when you're choosing not to react. Then he stood up. He looked at Scarlett for exactly 3 seconds. It was not the look of a man who was hurt. It was not the look of a man who was angry. It was something quieter and more difficult, the look of someone who has been seen wrong so many times that the surprise has long since worn off, and what remains is just a kind of tired clarity. He saw her. He didn't look away, and then he looked down at his daughter. "Come on, Lily. Let's go find Cotton." Lily scrambled to her feet, already moving past it the way children do. "Cotton went that way," she announced, pointing down the hallway. They walked. Scarlett watched them go. She turned back to Marcus, who had the good sense to say nothing, and she told herself the tightness in her chest was just the morning rush. She told herself that for most of the next hour. She almost believed it. Later that same afternoon, on the 38th floor, the floor reserved for the building's board-level conference rooms, a floor Scarlett had been to exactly 4 times in 6 years, something shifted. Edward Crane had called a meeting. This was not unusual. Edward called meetings the way other people cleared their throats frequently, and always to make sure everyone knew he was present. What was unusual was the setup. The conference room had been prepared more carefully than normal. The door attendants were unfamiliar faces, which Scarlett noted and filed. The documentation packets distributed to mid-level staff had 2 redactions on the cover page where the partnering entity's name should have been. "Our new strategic partner," Edward said from the head of the table, "has requested that their identity remain confidential through the close of preliminary negotiations. This is standard practice for transactions at this scale." He smiled. Edward Crane's smile never quite reached his eyes. Scarlett had worked with him for 3 years, and she still couldn't tell if this was personality or calculation. "What I can tell you is that this partnership represents a generational realignment for Pinnacle, and the people in this room who understand loyalty will be well positioned for what comes next." He paused, and Scarlett felt the specific weight of the word loyalty, the way it landed on the table, like something that expected a response. Marcus leaned toward her ear. "Someone told me this partner holds enough shares to put Edward in the CEO chair if they choose." He pulled back before she could answer. Scarlett looked at the redacted document in her hands. 12 years in development finance had taught her to pay attention when information was hidden rather than simply absent. Missing information was an oversight. Hidden information was a choice. She thought about asking a question, then decided she'd rather think first. She was 3 steps out of the elevator on her way down when she saw him again. Sebastian Holt was standing in the 38th floor hallway, phone pressed to his ear, voice low and unhurried. She caught only a fragment as she passed. "I need confirmation before 5 o'clock. No, they don't need to know I'm here." Then he looked up, and their eyes met for the second time that day. He ended the call, gave a small, neutral nod. The nod of a man who acknowledges someone's existence without attaching any additional meaning to it. Stepped into the elevator. Scarlett stood in the hallway after the doors closed, the redacted document still in her hand. There was no reason for a man in a worn flannel shirt to be on the 38th floor. There was no reason for him to be having that conversation. There was no reason for any of it to feel connected. She kept thinking about it anyway. She saw them again the following afternoon, in the small coffee shop, 2 blocks from the tower, the one with the narrow windows and the dried tulip arrangements on every table that nobody had ever changed. Scarlett came here when she needed to work, without being interrupted, which her own office rarely permitted. She had her laptop open and a half-finished cortado going cold beside her keyboard. She didn't see them come in. She heard Lily first. The little girl had spotted the tulip arrangement on the table to Scarlett's left and broke away from Sebastian's hand with the sudden, unstoppable momentum of a 5-year-old who has just seen something interesting. She pressed her nose against the dried blooms with grave scientific attention. Sebastian was 3 steps behind, already forming the apology. He stopped when he saw Scarlett. She looked up from her screen. The moment had the particular awkwardness of people who have shared a significant exchange and have not yet decided what it means. Sebastian said nothing for a beat. Then, "She moves faster than she looks." I noticed. Lily turned from the flowers and saw Scarlett. Something rearranged itself in her expression, the bright, uncomplicated recognition of a child who does not carry the weight of adult context. "You have red hair," she announced. "I do, like the lady in Daddy's painting." Lily looked back at her father with complete confidence in the information she was sharing. The one Mommy made. The lady with the red hair reading a book. Sebastian went very still. It was not a dramatic stillness, not the kind that announces itself. It was the kind that happened when something unexpectedly close to the surface was touched. He crouched down to Lily's level, gentle and unhurried. "Not every woman with red hair is the same person." Lily-bug. "I know that," Lily said, with the tone of someone who would like it, noted that she is not unreasonable. "I just said she looked like her." Scarlett watched Sebastian rise. There was something in his face in that moment, brief and unguarded, that she couldn't name precisely. Not grief, exactly. Something quieter. Something that had been carried long enough that it had become part of his ordinary weight. "Her mother painted," he said, not looking at Scarlett. "Just offering the information to the middle distance, as if it belonged to no one. She liked red in her work." Scarlett asked it before she thought better of it. "She's not, is she still around?" "Diana." He said the name simply. "She passed 3 years ago. No performance in it, no bid for sympathy, just a fact that lived in the air for a moment and then settled." Lily had moved on to examining the coffee menu board with extreme focus. She called back over her shoulder. "Daddy, can we look at the house drawing when we get home? The one you printed last night? The one with the swimming pool and the art room for me?" Sebastian said, quietly. "Lily, you said the art room was going to have a skylight," Lily continued, completely unbothered. "Cotton wants a skylight too." Scarlett looked at Sebastian's worn left shoe. She looked at the dried tulips. She looked at the matter-of-fact way Lily discussed a house with a swimming pool and a dedicated art room with a skylight, the way children speak about things that are simply true because they have been promised. And she felt the first small crack in something she had been carrying since the 12th floor hallway. She said nothing. Sebastian gathered his daughter gently by the hand, thanked Scarlett for nothing specifically, just a general thanks that covered the whole strange moment, and they left. Scarlett sat with her cold cortado and her open laptop and did not type anything for a long time. On Wednesday morning, Edward Crane called her into his private office. The document on his desk was the Riverside Apex transfer agreement, 18 months of her work, reduced to 12 pages of legalese, and somewhere in the middle of page 4, the receiving entity was listed as Crane Development, LLC. She had never heard that name before. She turned to page 8 to find the credit attribution clause. Her name appeared once, in the original Project Genesis section, which would be superseded on execution. The new development credit transferred entirely to the LLC. Edward explained it was a strategic realignment. He said the new partner had specific structural preferences. He said it was, in fact, a compliment to her work, that the project had reached a stage attractive enough to restructure at this level. He said a lot of things, each one smooth and reasonable, and building on the last the way a careful man constructs a case. Then he stopped building and went quiet for a moment. "I think you understand what I'm asking," he said. "The people who read the direction correctly here are going to have a very good year." "You're smart, Scarlett. You've always been smart." Another pause. "I'd hate to see that go unrewarded." She asked for 48 hours to review the documentation. He agreed immediately, which told her he was confident. She thanked him and left. In the hallway, Marcus fell into step beside her. He spoke without looking at her, the way people do when they're saying something they're not sure they should say. "Crane Development, LLC. I looked it up last night." Brief pause. 8 weeks old. registered to a business address that's in the same building as Edward's personal attorney. I'm not saying anything else." He peeled off toward his own office without waiting for a response. Scarlett sat at her desk and stared at the Riverside Apex agreement for 40 minutes. Then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. No contact name. The message read, "Miss Mercer, do not sign anything connected to Crane Development before we speak. S.H." She read it twice. Then she typed back, "Who are you?" No response came for 2 hours. Then, "Someone who has been watching this building longer than you know. Bryant Park, 7 o'clock. Near the fountain." She went, because curiosity has always been her most reliable engine, and because something about the message felt like a door being opened rather than a trap being set. She went also, though she wouldn't have admitted it then, because she already had a feeling she knew who S.H. was. It was raining lightly when she arrived. The kind of rain that can't decide whether to commit. She stood under the narrow overhang near the kiosk and watched the path, and Sebastian arrived exactly at 7, which she would later recognize as characteristic of him, not a minute early, not a minute late, no drama in either direction. He wore a dark jacket, collar up against the drizzle, no flannel tonight. Without it, he looked less like the lobby chair and more like himself, which was something she was only beginning to understand were different things. He stopped a few feet away and didn't sit, which she also came to understand was characteristic. Sebastian Holt stood when he was saying something that mattered. Edward Crane has been routing project development credit through personal holding entities for 11 years, he said. Not an accusation, not a speech, just sequence. The structure is designed so that when the transaction is examined, and it will be the signatory at the bottom of the transfer agreement, is you, not him. He reached into his jacket and laid a thin envelope on the iron railing between them. Business registration records for Crane Development. Cross-referenced wire transfers from Pinnacle's operating account. You can verify everything independently. She looked at the envelope. You're telling me he's using my name as a liability wall. He's done it twice before, with people who didn't know what they were signing. And what happened to them? One left the industry. One is still fighting a civil compliance review. Scarlett picked up the envelope. She held it without opening it. Why are you giving this to me? For the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not a smile exactly, but a softening around the eyes. Lily asked me last night why the woman with red hair at the coffee shop looked sad. The rain picked up slightly. Water traced along the edge of the overhang and dripped in a thin line at the corner of the shelter. She's very observant, Scarlett said. She always has been. He paused. Her mother was the same way. He turned to go. She watched him take 3 steps along the rain-damp path. Sebastian. She hadn't meant to use his name. It came out before she decided to. He stopped but didn't turn all the way. Thank you. He nodded once. Then he walked away through the rain, unhurried, and she stood holding an envelope that was going to upend everything she thought she understood about the past 6 years. On Friday afternoon, the lobby delivered one more collision. Scarlett was waiting for the elevator, portfolio in hand, watching the floor indicator count down from 22, when the main doors opened and Sebastian came through with Lily in his arms. Not the walk-beside arrangement from their other encounters. Lily was being carried, which was notable because Lily was not a child who consented to being carried except under duress. Her cheeks were flushed, a deep rose, her eyes were heavy, and she had cotton pressed against her face like a compress. Sebastian was on his phone. The controlled, quiet efficiency of his usual manner had a hairline fracture in it, visible only because Scarlett had now spent enough time observing him to know the baseline. He was saying, low and level, I know. I need to reschedule the 4:30 entirely. Lily started running a temperature after pickup. A pause. No, it can't be Tuesday. Another pause, and a short exhale that wasn't quite a sigh. Fine. I'll call you back. He lowered the phone. Lily lifted her head from cotton and saw Scarlett. The red hair lady, she announced, with the dreamy authority of a feverish child. Scarlett stepped forward without planning to. She pressed the back of her hand against Lily's forehead, an automatic gesture, the kind her older sister made in the pediatrician's waiting room. The heat was immediate and significant. She's running pretty high, Scarlett said. Sebastian looked at her. I know. I didn't expect it to come on this fast. Do you have anything for her? A pause. I not with me. Scarlett was already opening the side pocket of her portfolio. She carried children's Tylenol because her sister's kids visited on weekends, and she was the aunt who thought to have it. She didn't examine the logic of why she had it. She just handed it over. Sebastian looked at the small orange box in his hand for a moment. Then at Scarlett. Something in his expression said he was recalibrating, but he didn't show it beyond that. They sat in the lobby chairs, the same chairs where she had first seen him a week ago, while Sebastian measured the dose and coaxed Lily into taking it, with the patient expertise of a man who had done this alone for 3 years. Lily swallowed it with the theatrical suffering of someone who needs the record to show that this was an imposition, then immediately leaned against her father's shoulder and pulled cotton against her chest. She looked at Scarlett. "Are you Daddy's friend?" The question sat in the air, with perfect, uncomplicated weight. Scarlett glanced at Sebastian, who looked back at her with that same steady, neutral expression, open, unhurried, offering nothing and taking nothing, leaving the space entirely for her. "We're getting to know each other," Scarlett said. Lily considered this with great seriousness. "You should be his real friend," she said. "Daddy only has Uncle Marcus and Cotton. Cotton isn't real, but Daddy still talks to him sometimes when he thinks I'm asleep." "Lily," Sebastian said, very quietly. "I'm just telling the truth," Lily said, and closed her eyes. They sat there for a few minutes without speaking. The lobby moved around them, heels on marble, elevator chimes, the soft percussion of revolving doors. Lily's breathing slowed into the long, even rhythm of sleep, her weight against Sebastian's side, cotton tucked beneath her chin. He looked over at Scarlett. "Thank you," he said. The same 2 words as the night in Bryant Park. But this time there was something beneath them, something that acknowledged more than medication. Scarlett did not stand up right away. She stayed, and neither of them remarked on it. On Saturday morning, Scarlett was in her apartment with a second cup of coffee and her laptop open to the weekend section of the Journal when she saw his face. The headline was not subtle. Holt Capital confirms quarter. 3 acquisition of 3 Manhattan towers. Founder Sebastian Holt surfaces after 3-year absence. The photograph was 3 years old, taken at a conference she now recognized as the Urban Land Institute Annual Summit. He wore a dark suit. His expression was the same expression she had seen in every one of their conversations, calm, contained, arriving at nothing it hadn't already considered. She read the article. She read it again. $4.2 billion in real estate assets under control across 8 countries. Founded Holt Capital at 24, 2 years after graduating from Columbia with a degree in structural engineering. Withdrew from public-facing operations 3 years ago, following the death of his wife, Diana Holt, née Wren, a painter. The piece noted, who had studied at the Pratt Institute, and whose work had been shown in 3 gallery exhibitions. He had run the company from a position of deliberate anonymity since then, raising his daughter. Scarlett set down her coffee cup. She thought about the worn left shoe, the Tojai notepad, the 38th floor, the text message, the envelope in the rain. She opened a secondary search and cross-referenced Holt Capital's known portfolio with Pinnacle Properties Group and found what she had already, somewhere in the back of her thinking, expected to find. Holt Capital held a 23% strategic interest in Pinnacle Properties Group, the single largest non-institutional stake. Sebastian Holt was not an outside partner being courted by Edward Crane's maneuvering. He was the reason the building existed at the scale it did. He was, by every material measure, the most consequential person in any room he had walked into at Pinnacle. He had been there the whole time in an old flannel shirt, answering his daughter's questions about clouds. And in a hallway on the 12th floor, with an audience of 3, Scarlett Mercer had said, "I don't date men like that." She sat with that for a long time. The coffee went cold again. She didn't notice. The Monday meeting was brief, and it was precise, and it ended Edward Crane's tenure at Pinnacle Properties in 17 minutes. Sebastian arrived last, which she understood now was a deliberate choice, the preference for observing a room that is already assembled. He wore a white Oxford shirt, collar open, no jacket, nothing theatrical, nothing that announced what was coming. The change from the flannel was not about the shirt. It was about the room recognizing him. And the room did. Immediately, the way rooms do when the person who actually controls the outcome walks in and stops performing otherwise. Two attorneys from Holt Capital's legal team occupied the chairs at the foot of the table. A compliance officer from the Securities and Exchange Commission sat beside them with a closed file folder and the expression of someone who has already finished forming their conclusions. Edward Crane had come in at his usual hour, with his usual confidence, carrying his presentation materials. He had read the meeting invitation, seen the standard boardroom notation, and decided this was his moment. He had miscalculated the guest list. Sebastian sat. He opened a file without preamble. Crane Development LLC was incorporated 8 weeks ago using seed capital transferred from Pinnacle's operating account without board approval and without disclosure of the principal officer's conflict of interest. His voice was the same voice he used to tell Lily that clouds don't stand still. Entirely level, entirely without theater. The Riverside Apex transfer agreement was structured to route $12 million in development credit to the LLC and to position a Pinnacle employee as the primary signatory, creating liability insulation for the originating party. He turned a page. The transaction has no board authorization, no counter-signature from any member of the Oversight Committee. It has only the signature of the Chief Operating Officer and a junior paralegal whose employment was terminated this morning pursuant to a separate matter. Edward opened his mouth. The documentation was independently corroborated, Sebastian said, before anything else could be added, and has been submitted to the relevant regulatory body. You are welcome to review the chain of evidence with your legal representative, who I would suggest you contact now. The SEC compliance officer stood. The Holt Capital attorneys rose together. Edward Crane left the room. He did not speak as he passed Scarlett's chair. He did not look at her. She sat with her hands folded on the table and watched him go, and felt, mostly, a very specific exhaustion, the kind that comes when you understand how close you came to something and only now have the distance to measure it. Sebastian was still signing transfer documents when the room emptied. He worked through them without lifting his head. She waited until the last Holt Capital attorney had gathered his materials and stepped out. Then she was alone with him and the quiet of the cleared conference room. He glanced up, just briefly, then went back to the last page. Your name appears nowhere in the regulatory filing, he said, without looking up. The corroborating documentation was submitted through Holt Capital's legal team. There's no connection to you on paper. You protected me, she said. I protected the employee who was being set up to take a fall. He signed the last line and closed the folder. The fact that it was you was circumstantial. She looked at him. No, it wasn't. He didn't deny it. He capped his pen and set it on the table and finally looked at her fully, without the paperwork between them. Thank you, she said, for all of it. The envelope, the information, keeping my name clear. She paused. And for not making me feel it. Sebastian was quiet for a moment. You didn't need me to make you feel anything. You figured out what was happening. You just needed time to verify it. She shook her head. That's not all I mean. He waited. The hallway, she said. On the 12th floor. What I said. She held the weight of it without putting it down. I said it because I looked at your shoes instead of your face, and I said it in front of your daughter. Which is the part I've been thinking about for the better part of a week. Sebastian was still for a moment. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan was doing its ordinary work towers and sky, and the thin seam of light between them. Those shoes, he said carefully, belonged to Diana. She bought them for me in 2019. She said I looked ridiculous in polished leather. The edges of something moved across his expression, not grief, exactly, but its quieter descendant. I kept wearing them because it was easier than buying new ones, or because I didn't want to. I'm not sure which. Scarlett didn't speak. I'm not telling you that to make you feel worse, he said. I'm telling you because you said you wanted to understand what you'd missed. That's what you missed. He paused. You didn't see what the shoes were. You saw what they cost. The afternoon light moved on the conference table between them. Somewhere in the building, an elevator chimed. Scarlett Mercer was not a woman who was easily reduced to silence. She had been in rooms with people who had more money, more power, and more credentials than she would ever have. And she had held her ground in every one of them. But she had nothing to say to this, because it was simply and entirely true, and she had spent enough of her life in proximity to truth to recognize when it had finally arrived. He found her in the hallway 10 minutes later, as she was waiting for the elevator with her portfolio against her chest and a mind that had not yet finished reorganizing itself. Lily came first. She was being walked up from the lobby by a woman Scarlett assumed was Sebastian's regular sitter, but when Lily saw Scarlett, she let go of the woman's hand and closed the distance at full sprint, which was fast enough to be genuinely concerning. She wrapped both arms around Scarlett's legs with the complete conviction of a child who has decided something. "Your knee is better," Scarlett said, looking down at her. "All better," Lily confirmed. "Cotton, too. His ear was bent, but Daddy fixed it." She held up the rabbit for inspection. The ear was, in fact, perfectly restored. A small, careful repair job that you'd only notice if you were looking. Daddy said ears are important because that's how you know someone is listening. Sebastian arrived at the end of the hallway, unhurried. He said a few words to the sitter, who nodded and moved toward the elevator. He came to stand near Scarlett, not too close, and looked down at his daughter with the long-practiced expression of a man who has learned to let Lily say whatever Lily is going to say, because it is almost always faster. "Co-Scarlett," Lily announced, trying out the combination of title and name with great satisfaction. "Do you want to be Daddy's friend? His real one? I already asked before, but you said you were still deciding." "I said we were getting to know each other," Scarlett said. "That's the same thing," Lily said, with absolute authority. Sebastian looked at Scarlett, not the steady, neutral look of a man protecting himself. Something a few degrees warmer than that. Something that had decided, at some prior moment she hadn't been present for, to let the door stand open. Scarlett crouched down to Lily's height. "I was wrong about your father," she said. "I made up my mind too fast, and I didn't look carefully enough. Do you know what that means?" Lily thought about this. "It means you need to look again." "Exactly." Lily nodded with the gravity of a judge. Then she looked at her father. "Daddy," Co-Scarlett said, "she needs to look again." Sebastian's expression, in the private half-second before he composed it back to neutral, was the closest thing to unguarded that Scarlett had seen from him. Something quiet and genuine moved through it, and was gone. "I heard her," he said. On Friday evening the following week, they met in Bryant Park again, the same park, different weather. October had briefly remembered how to be golden, and the light through the remaining leaves was low and warm and charitable to everything it touched. Lily ran ahead of them on the gravel path with Cotton under one arm, declaring the names of flowers to anyone within range. "Daddy, those are tulips, the red ones. I see them. Cotton sees them too." She turned and pointed at Scarlett. "Those ones are the same color as your hair, Co-Scarlett." "I've been told that before," Scarlett said. Sebastian walked beside her with his hands in his jacket pockets. They had not touched, not in any intentional way. They didn't need to yet. The distance between them had changed character over the course of the week, from the careful blankness of two people managing an awkward history, to something that breathed more easily. They talked about the building, about what would change at Pinnacle in the coming quarter, about Lily's strong opinions regarding skylight dimensions. They talked about Diana once, briefly, when Scarlett asked without making it complicated, and Sebastian answered the same way. She had been specific and difficult and funny, and had made him look at buildings differently, which was why he had gone into real estate in the first place. She would have had thoughts about Riverside Apex, he said, mostly critical. She was right about most things. Lily doubled back from the tulip beds with a small cluster of blooms from the designated open picking section near the south path, which Sebastian had apparently explained to her 3 times before they arrived. She presented them to Scarlett with both hands and the formality of a diplomat. "These are for you," Lily said. "Daddy told me once that tulips are the flower for people who know how to wait." Sebastian looked at Lily. "I don't think I've ever said that." "You said it in your head," Lily explained, with complete confidence, and ran back toward the flower bed. Scarlett looked down at the small, bright cluster in her hands. The petals were thin and exact, and the color of something she was still learning to name. "She does that," Sebastian said, watching his daughter navigate the garden with Cotton extended in front of her like a compass. "Decides what something means, and then says it as if it was always true. She's usually not wrong. No, he said. She usually isn't. They stood on the gravel path while the light moved through the park at the particular angle of early fall, the kind that makes everything look slightly more finished than it is. Lily called back from the far end of the bed that Cotton wanted a photograph with the red tulips. And Sebastian said they'd be right there, and Scarlett held her flowers and didn't think about her image, or her portfolio, or the Riverside Apex timeline, or any of the 100 things she usually carried. She thought about an old left shoe, worn down on one side from 3 years of walking alone. She thought about a child who asked questions that deserved real answers. She thought about the small repair on a stuffed rabbit's ear, done carefully enough that you'd only notice if you were looking for it. And she thought that the most expensive mistake you can make is the one that costs you nothing, just 3 seconds, just a glance, just a reflex you never thought to question. Lily waved at them from the tulip bed. They walked toward her together. Word count. To 5,640 words. Story. Saint 61. DT. Media production script.